Yeah, well, yeah, of course, yeah. And so the conclusion is that if this activity is too long or it requires a lot of implementation, requires a special equipment, a special material, then it's not worth it. No, it's not worth spending so much time, you know, for an activity that maybe you already did in class and it worked great. It worked well as a target language use task. No, so you leave it like that. No, you leave it
Mhm.
like that. Great. And number two, somebody. What about
Um,
number two in your own
y-
words? Uh-huh.
yeah, number two basically says that a TLU task is kind of problematic in order to assess individual performance. Therefore, it is usually used with groups of people. For example, here it uses an oral activity as an example. So that way, it says that if you want to assess individually, it is not very practical to use this kind of task.
Yeah. Let me see if I got it right. So let's see. If you okay, well, because I don't know if I'm afraid I didn't quite
I
follow what you said. Can you
so
repeat, please?
yeah, I'm going to say it in a more simple way. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know that TLU tasks are very complex and are kind of long. Therefore, it is it is just not practical to assess a individual student performance. Here in this paragraph, it says, for example, when you use a oral group activity, you might not have enough time to assess each individual performance of the group. So that's why using TLU tasks with just single students, it takes a lot of time and therefore is not practical.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. Yes. Yes. I that's what the the second item says. No. Yeah. That you it might not be practical. It might not be worth no applying a task that is usually designed for group work. No. Great, and it works perfect as a language task. No. O sea, funciona bien como actividad. For example, one day that you want to work in groups, you know, and so the activity was perfect in groups, yes, but it's only an activity. It's a target language task, no? Right? But then if you want to do the same uh, for a quiz, yeah, okay, it's more difficult because if you want to get results, if you want to get students real level of ability in speaking, for example, speaking and you know intonation, everything, it's going to be more difficult because you will have to because you will be maybe tempted to repeat the experience that happened in the task, no, that everybody enjoy talking, blah blah blah. But if you have to be more let's say picky, no, if you have to be picky about everybody's mistakes, you would have to separate now each student from the group and take it, and so it's not worth it, no. So it's better to think about another activity in which you have only one student participation or one student's participation, or maximum maybe in pairs, no. In pairs you can easily distinguish, you can see how one is performing, how the other one is performing, so it's usually better in pairs, no. Great, yeah. Thank you, Hugo. Now I was looking at number three. Now I read number three. Basically, what it says in number three, if we can scroll down here, um, about security. There's always this concern that we have as teachers that that students may get, for example, the questions in advance, no? That somehow they find out, they manage to know what the teacher is going to have, no, or what the quiz is going to what what the quiz has, no, what the already has, because it could be for many reasons. Now, for example, here it says because the students finish the class, finish their test, and then they immediately leave the room and they tell the other students, no? For example, when you're doing pair work, no? I mean, an evaluation in pairs. The students leave the room and they tell the others, oh, the teacher is asking this and this and that. So when you need to obtain information about individual students, make sure that what the author says is make sure that those answers and that production is based on the student's real level, no, of ability, and not because they already know the topic, no? Because sometimes, that's why, for example, all authors recommend that when preparing an assessment, don't use the same readings, the same conversations that you already have in the book, because some students may be tempted to memorize the conversations, and when you give them the quiz, you are not really measuring their real knowledge, no? But what you are assessing is their memory, no? How much they can remember about a reading, about a question in the book. So well, there are some considerations that you have to make as a teacher, and of course, by all means, avoid students being helped or students being tipped off with the questions and the answers, and avoid cheating, no? Avoid cheating. Como dice al final, make sure that the students don't share their answers with each other during the assessment. No? During the assessment. Yeah, and number 4, can anybody tell us about number 4? What is the recommendation in the last one, in number 4? Anybody, please? Somebody?
About the last.
Yes, the last one.
Well, I understood that if a student have a kind of familiarity with the topic
Familiarity with the
in the
topic.
input, it can how can I say, if affect in the student
Affect.
performance
Yes.
on a language assessment.
Yes. Yes. Great. Yeah. So again, no, it's better to use new material. Well, of course, the template, you can use a template. Yes, como una guía, of course, no, because you have the steps and everything. But you change or you modify the task, no? You modify the task. So, for example, if you have a good topic, reading, for example, you have an interesting article in the book, well, choose a similar article, no? For example, about the same topic, for example, computers, no? Right? But don't use the same topic, don't use the same questions, because this will create a, how can we call it, a sesgo, no? You already know, if you already know the text, then, and other students don't know the text, then it's not really fair, no? It's breaking one of the principles in developing tasks, no? That they should be impartial, no? They should be, they should avoid this, no? Great, and so that's about this page. On the next page, if we can go, where are we now? Let me see here. Yeah, because further on this page, we have the meaning of an assessment task template. I don't know, because I'm using my book, but here, familiarity. After the familiarity, for these reasons, blah, blah. Yeah, this one, elicit performance. Yeah, over here, no? Over here. Yeah. And yeah, here, an assessment task template. It's in blue, no, in this document. So here you have the definition of assessment template, which we already covered in the review. It's the basis for creating different assessment tasks, no, that have many activities and procedures and task characteristics in common. So it consists of, and that's one of the questions I asked, you have a set of activities and procedures to be followed in administering the assessment. You have the set of TCs, and you have a recording method. It's basically the review that we did today. Now, what is very useful here is this, no? That when you modify assessment tasks to develop a template for creating assessment tasks, you need to make sure that the assessment tasks that are created from this new template will cover these 4 aspects, no? So one, that elicit performance that engages the ability to be assessed, no? So in other words, it should be valid, no? Sorry, valid, because you're testing or you're assessing what one of the abilities that you already taught in class, no? Second, that it will correspond to the TLU tasks, no? So to all this variety of tasks that the book presents that you practice in class, it should correspond to this. Also, that the template would provide assessment records that are consistent, what we saw in the review, and that they would be practical to develop, administer, and use in the classroom. So the principle of practicality. No? Huh? So as you can see, it goes hand in hand with those with this 5 with the qualities, no, of an assessment, no, meaningfulness, consistency, practicality, impartiality, and well, I'm missing one. Okay, and so therefore, if you want your template to have all these 4 items here mentioned here, then therefore you need to ask yourself the following questions. No? So the questions are related to the 4 items above. No? You need to ask if the template, I mean, how well will the assessment task elicit the ability that you want to assess? And then how closely will the assessment task correspond to the TLU task? How consistent will the assessment records be? No, number 3 goes with number 3. And you need to ask if the assessment tasks will be practical, no? If they're practical to administer, to grade, to use, to develop, all that. So again, it's like a circle, no? So where you always have to remember the basic principles, no? Right. And so, and then we have this, no? Procedures in step 3. Yeah, and then we have this step 3 part A. If we can go on to the next page. Step 3A. Okay, great. Yeah, well, just before this, but you don't need to go on to the next page. But just before this, I forgot something important. In this step 3, when you modify the TLU task, that you have that we described in step 2, we have to proceed like this. No, we have these 2 steps. No, these 2 considerations. Number 1, about TLU activities and procedures. No, for the TLU activities and procedures, we need to specify the reasons for making the modifications to the TLU task. And B, make the modifications to the TLU task. And then when we talk about the TLU task characteristics, that's what you have on the screen here. Also, we have 2 considerations to make. One, we have to specify the reasons for making the modifications to the TLU teaching characteristics. No, that's what the pointer is indicating here. And B, make the modifications to the TLU task characteristics. No, to the TLU task characteristics. Great. Okay. So in other words, you have to keep a record of all these modifications, so to speak. No? Great. And so then we have this, for example, we have this example here that you see in the box. No. And I would like to have somebody volunteer to read this introduction, please. Step 3A, modifying the activities and procedures of the TLU task.
Let me see. Modifying the
Please,
activities and procedures of the TLU task to create an assessment task template for the example speaking assessment task is illustrated in table 8.4. The TLU task is a collaborative group activity, and the teacher needs to obtain speaking scores for individual students. Thus, the reason these activities and procedures of the TLU task were modified was to make it possible to obtain speaking scores for individual students.
Exactly, no, because that's a, well, if you think about it, no, is in all fairness, no, in all fairness, if we're working with groups, no, and eventually, if one of the summative decisions that we have is to decide which students deserve to pass and which don't, no, well, especially when you're working with bigger students, no, when you're working in secondary and when you're working in institutes, let's say, or maybe in well, in an environment where you are allowed to fail students. Now, let's be honest, because sometimes in some schools you can't fail students because then you have to pass them. No, sooner or later you have to pass them, and on the expense of you spending your summer teaching them and giving them tutorials and everything. No? So it's not, sometimes it's not worth it. But in all fairness, no, if the ultimate decision is to promote the students to the next level, you want to get their individual scores. No? You need to get their individual grades, their individual marks. And so speaking is one of these these activities that sometimes it's difficult to grade individually, you know, because it's time consuming, no? Sometimes if you're working with 30 or 40 students, you have to spend 2 or 3 days. ¿No? Pero a veces el colegio te da un día and say, no, today is the written exam, tomorrow is the oral exam. And so it's complicated, okay? But in all fairness, then you can take one of the tasks, modify the task, and try and use it for as an the assessment task, no? And so here you have an example, no? A description of the modified task: speaking individually, describing an animal from a picture in pairs. No? Areas of a language ability to be assessed: no? Remember that here you have to be very specific. For example, using accurate grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation in speaking. Activities that and procedures to be followed. You have all of this. No? The day before the assessment, the teacher tells the students to prepare this and this and that. B. Well, going all the way down here, B would be this. Now, on the day of, maybe we can go to the next page, or it's on my right. It's on the right.
Yeah, it's on.
Then 10 will be given individually, or let me see where that is. Purpose. Yeah, on the day before the assessment. Well, B says on the day of the assessment, the teacher assesses each student in pair individually, no? In each pair individual. And so, and then you have a set of things that the teacher is going to do there. No? For example, the teacher briefly explains the assessment again, makes sure that students understand the procedure, calls their names, calls to students to go to the speaking corner of the room, blah, blah, blah. All the things that you as a teacher need to do. No? That's on the day of the assessment. Great. And then you have C, during. I don't know if we have access to that one. Maybe it's on the next page.
Yes, during the next lesson.
During the next lesson after the assessment. No? For example, the teacher gives the student their recording forms with their scores and written feedback. The teacher gives the class general feedback on their areas of strength and the areas in which they need to improve. And the teacher also provides suggestions for ways in which students can improve their speaking. But some, I don't know, some schools do that. But I remember, for example, when I was working in this other place in Católica, we were not allowed to give the students the grades at that very moment, no? To avoid this, I mean, complaints that they, or to avoid students asking for help because they sometimes they failed, and then they say, no, but teacher, can you help me with 2 more points, blah, blah, blah. And so we usually did this at the end, no? So after doing all the students, no, in pairs, then I had to call back in all students, and then I had to give them the grade. And if that was the case, I had to address, you know, to those students who failed and explain, oh, you failed, you're failing because this and this and that, and you need to improve this and that. And it was really, really tough. No, I don't want to remember much. I don't want to remember that. But basically, for example, here, no, as this indicates here, you maybe you can do it there, no? I mean, if you have time, no? Or if not, you would have to wait for maybe for the next day, no? Great, but this is an example, no? So from an activity or from a task that was describing an animal in pairs, you make these modifications, no? And you can use it as an assessment task. No? So that's basically what the example here is, no? And then, well, the second part is about the task characteristics, no? Well, I'm going to ask you to read that at home, no? Because exactly as we proceeded here with the description of the task, of the modified task, hay que hacer lo mismo with the task characteristics of the TLU task. So again, you take the original format, maybe of the and I mean, you take this format of the task characteristics and you fill in the 3 sections: setting, input, expected response. And you proceed in the same way. You write what you think should be modified, no? Should be adapted to fit and also to give you what you need for to test your student, or to assess your students. So you have an example on the next page, on page, well, here is on page 101, no? And then you have a complete example. You have the same example about this speaking activity. And then 102, you have the same, no? You have this task, no, about speaking, describing animals in groups. So it's better that if you look at the yourself, no, you look at the, what vamos a llamarle template. So you look at this, okay, and you can analyze, no, in your own time, in your own way. Great. And so, yeah, so I'm going to ask you to please finish reading this, and also reading step 4, step 5. You know, it's only 3 more pages. Yeah, you can do that over the weekend. Yeah, and now I'm going to use this. I don't know. I think I have 5 minutes. I don't know, to tell you about a series of presentations that we're going to do next week. That you are going to do next week. Well, first, okay, Monday we're going to do chapters 9 and 10. No, they're not very long, so because we have 3 hours, I think we can do both chapters. No, chapter 9 is about creating language assessment tasks, no? Which you're going to find very interesting. And chapter 10 is combining assessment tasks to make classroom-based assessments. No, so also something that we do in class. No, I mean that we do when we think about a quiz, or you want to do a reinforcement or something. You want to use the assessment tasks, no? And then you want to adapt them to be or to become a classroom-based, no? About things that you've done in class. So you're going to find that interesting too. And so so Monday we're going to do those 2 chapters. So if you have time, read those 2 chapters, because it's going to help you understand more easily, more quickly this. And so, and then next Thursday we're going to start presentations. We're going to do the last, well, at the end of the book, we have examples of assessment tasks, no? For reading, writing, speaking, and listening. There's a total of 9 in the book. There are 6 more in a website. No, well, you can see the link later. Yeah, and so the idea is that we're going to make 7 groups, because we have 27 students. No? 6. So either we can make 6 groups of 4. Okay, so 6 times 4 is 24. But maybe 2 or 3 groups will have 5 students, or we can make 7 groups. 7 groups of 4 students, but only 1 group of 3, because it's 27. Yeah. Well, you can discuss that later. You can organize that later, and you can
sorry,
tell Abby the groups. Yes.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting you. Would you mind repeating that again? We need to work in groups, but which
In groups, no?
Yeah,
Yes.
topics.
I need 6 or 7 groups. Yeah. The topic is that you have to present one of the example of assessment tasks that are in the book after chapter 12. If somebody can get the book, you can start reading. You can look at the examples. If not, tomorrow I'm going to send Abby the photos, no? The photos of the examples. I already sent her some photos of the introduction. Yeah, that she can share with you that after the class.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is that you pick one of these activities that are already explained here. You take the information that you consider more important, You can use the same templates that we have here, but not all, because each example is 3 pages, 2 pages long, so with a lot of specifications and all that. But we want to make it simple because of time. So I was thinking maybe about 15 to 20 minutes for each group. And so we can start next Thursday, and the other, we can do two groups or 3 on next Thursday, and the other 3 or 4, or I don't know how many, on Monday, no? On Monday, I don't know the date. Yeah, and so, yeah, so I'll send you, well, first you can organize the groups, then I'll send you the photos later. Avi has the pictures of the first introduction, so you can read what it is about. No? And as soon as you have the groups, I think it's better if you start working over the weekend, because it might be a little expensive. But basically, what you have to do is explain, not read, no, because we already have the templates here. Everybody can read the templates in their free time, so we don't need that. What you have to do is explain, no? What happens for example, if you take the speaking activity. Okay, you say, for example, this speaking activity is about describing animals. No? The setting is this. No? And so we anticipate this intended consequences, intended decisions. Well, aquí es un análisis medio completo. ¿No? We have to remember the intended interpretations. And at the end, after all this, after presenting all this, then you have the task. You have the task development characteristics. Now, for example, setting, input, expected response. The template. No, so then at the end comes the template, and you have to explain the template. Now, well, I'm sure that a lot of things are going to be left out, because otherwise every group will need 1 or 2 hours, and it would take us a few weeks to do that. But 20 minutes maybe, tops, explaining the most important thing. You can show a little bit, don't say, well, this is the template, and of course as you remember, we have to do this and this and that, and you using technology, using the slides, you can facilitate this, no, all this. Okay, well, of course, now it's not very clear yet, but I'm gonna write it in a text, no, exactly what you have to do. I'm gonna send Avi the photos, and well, if you have time, you can start working this weekend, or you can do it next week, because presentations start next Thursday, so you still have some time. Okay.
Prof. Yeah. Okay, Prof.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So let's call it a day. No, let's call it a day now. It's 7:30. Yeah. So you can have this 30 minutes for you to review things, do any reading or anything you want. Thank you very much, and have a nice weekend.
Thank you, Prof. See you next week.
Thank you, Prof.
See you next week, Monday. You're welcome. You're very welcome.
Thanks, Prof.
Enjoy it. Have a nice weekend. Take it easy.
Thanks, Prof. See you.
Welcome. You're very welcome. See you.